and welcome. Rage Inner Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the mental game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. So how are you this week? Oh boy. And on it goes, right? Hope you're staying reasonably sane. That's getting harder. We just had another big snowstorm come through. I took my beautiful new scooter to an event Tuesday night. That's how nice it was. By Thursday morning, I was digging out from a pretty big dump of snow. Bummer too, I was like 5 minutes in and our snowblower broke, so I had to do the rest by hand. Didn't love that. Though it was good to get some exercise and to remember that I'm allowed to do that now. That's nice, so felt good about that. Gonna need a new snowblower for the next season though. Maybe get an electric one this time, that would be nice. Anyway, as always, plenty to talk about this week. Trump's growing assault on the courts, the protests against Elon and Tesla, a remarkable list of terrible things Trump and Elon and Republicans have been up to, a way to cut down on worrying, a nice challenge for the week, and a good batch of new recommendations. All right, we'll start with ups and downs. So what things gave me a lift this week and what things are pulling me down? For my ups, I had quite a few this week. We had dinner out at a new place, new to me anyway, about 20 minutes away. And you have to remember, in our little town, there are literally only 2 or 3 options for places to eat, so a new place is a big deal. And it looked like not much, driving up to it, out in the middle of nowhere, sort of a dumpy building. But it was actually really funky and cool, and we enjoyed it quite a bit. It was Friday, so it was fish fry day. And I'll tell you, I do believe that was the tastiest fish I've ever had. Crispy, really good. We also saw a ton of people we knew there from town. That was a surprise. And this is really funny. I'd met with a friend that morning for coffee just to catch up. He was wearing a t-shirt with a logo I didn't recognize. We didn't talk about it, I just noticed. As we pulled up to the restaurant, I noticed it was the same logo. So I thought, well, this is wild. I just happened to see this for the first time this morning, and now we're having dinner here. How cool is that? So I mentioned that in the car, and my brother-in-law, as a joke, said, maybe he'll be here. That was funny. We laughed, and then we walked in, and he was there. We ended up sitting right next to him. That was a freaky coincidence. Anyway, it was a good time. The food was great. The only thing was, it was a bit too loud. Couldn't really hear each other talking. Busy, noisy Friday, but overall, a good pick-me-up. This was really great. I've been coaching a young skier. I think I've mentioned that before, but he was in the biggest competition of the season this week, something we've been working towards the whole year. And his dad sent me a picture of him skiing, and he just looked amazing. Deep carved, looked just like an Olympic skier. This kid's 13. He weighs like 80 pounds, but he looked great. Everyone I showed it to was really impressed, and I showed it to everyone I could think of. It's just a great shot. I haven't heard how everything went yet. At that point, things were going well, and of course, that's the important thing. But still, it was a really great picture, and it was great to see it. Another good one, I've been getting to know a new sort of a business buddy. I might have mentioned him also, sort of in the same business, online training, personal development. We connected over the book I co-wrote with John Miller, QBQ. Anyway, he's been checking out the Raise Your Inner Game book and training, and he sent me a note this week saying he loved the material so much, and it's helping him so much, he's actually considering getting a tattoo of one piece of the material. It'll say, no quiet. That's the first mental game skill you learn in the book. We call it no quiet, and the idea is you notice the other person in your head talking to you, distracting you, you turn to it and say, no, quiet. So he's found that so helpful. He's not kidding. He's going to send me a picture of the tattoo when he gets it. Oh my goodness, you can imagine that lit me up quite a bit. The last one, not really an up, but I got a measles booster this week. The up part was that I can just call over to the clinic in town, get an appointment later that same day, get the shot, easy peasy, and now I don't have to worry about that. The down is that I have to. I mean, come on, this disease, which can be super serious, we have not had to give that one thought for decades. But because we've lost our collective mind, here we are again. Me, 66 years old, needing a measles booster because enough of the public has convinced themselves that vaccines are more dangerous than the disease they prevent, which is just nonsense. We're now having to deal with this again, literally going backwards with science and public health in our country. That's a down. Speaking of downs, I talked about this last week, but the scale, when you're trying to lose weight, the bedroom scale or bathroom, wherever you put it, can be a real monster. I think it was last week. I was saying the great thing about Noom is that you can be confident you're on track even if the scale is not showing that. That's still true, but it doesn't mean it's not super frustrating when you hit a plateau. And this wasn't a huge one for me, but just right around the 2-week mark, when you should expect to start seeing real progress, maybe 3-4 pounds down, it jumped back up to where I started and stayed there for 3 days straight. No movement of any kind, even though I was doing a great job of following the program. Doesn't sound that bad maybe, but when you're doing that work every day and you've been really good about it, it's just cruel to have the scale say, nope, no progress. And I know it's fine. It started to drop again, the last couple of days, but it's funny to see how hard that really is. The other down, this is complicated, but we finally listed our Tesla for sale. I've mentioned I've been kind of skirting around that. We finally went and did it. Would never have believed that was possible. We love the car so much and have loved the brand and Elon so much. But that's how much things have changed, and it feels like a real loss. There's a real sadness around it. And the decision for us, it's not really just a protest against Elon, though I'm happy to do that. It won't hurt him in any way for us to sell our car. We just don't feel comfortable in it. We feel like we're making some sort of political statement every time we go to the store, which of course we're not, and we shouldn't have to be seen that way and worry about that. Anyway, that's where we are. We'll see if anyone wants to buy it, but we've officially made the break. All right, those are my ups and downs for this week. Next up, top stories. Hard to choose again this week. There's so much going on. But I think the big one has to be the deportations. These are really getting wild. The stories, not just about the Venezuelans, that's a bit complicated, but the other people being rounded up and deported without legal process, and even by mistake in some cases. The 10-year-old girl with brain cancer, 10-year-old girl with brain cancer, my goodness, a U.S. citizen, birthright citizen, born here, though her parents are illegals, on her way to get continued treatment, snatched up, deported. German guy comes into the country, gets strip searched and interrogated in the airport. Both the UK and Britain now have issued travel advisories telling their citizens to maybe not come to the U.S. It's not safe. Can you imagine? And the real issue under all this is that it's illegal. They're pushing right up against the limits, challenging the court's jurisdiction, lying, misleading judges. And that's really bad just on its face, right? The way they're treating people, the cruelty, the stupidity in so many ways. There was a member of parliament in France who said, "You guys need to send back the Statue of Liberty. You don't deserve it anymore," which is super funny, but also says so much about the damage these policies are doing and will continue to do to our reputation and safety and security. But the real danger goes even beyond that. I believe, and it's not just me, I think, saying this, they're starting with immigration because that has the least public support, illegal aliens, but the real goal is to get to where they start to ignore the courts altogether. And you see this happening every day now. More and more people on the right are framing this as rogue judges, inserting themselves into making policy, which of course is simply not true. Judges don't make policy. Congress makes policies. Judges just make sure the government follows the law. The only reason you attack the courts is if you want to break the law, if you think you should be above it. But they're being more and more overt on this, repeating the same frame over and over. Judges need to be impeached. Radical judges blocking the president from doing what he was elected to do. Something has to change. This can't be allowed. Tom Homan, the border czar, said straight out, "I don't care what judges think." Again, it's not what judges think. It's what the laws say laws passed by Congress and signed by presidents. But that's what they're doing right now. And the end goal is not about immigration. It's about being fully above the law to do whatever they want. And they are very close to making that move. So just imagine where that might go. There was a French scientist coming here for a conference. Agents searched his phone. First of all, why can they do that? But they found messages critical of the cuts to science funding. That seemed like a fair thing for a scientist to be critical of, cuts to science funding. But the agent deemed that message to indicate a, quote, hatred of Trump, which could be qualified as terrorism, end quote, and refused him entry. Think about that. Messages really just indirectly critical of Trump, the great leader, classified as terrorism and used to justify deportation. If that's where we're going, this pod is getting me kicked out for sure, and probably you too for listening to it. And once he makes that move to be above the law, that's where it's all headed. There is no doubt about that. Criticism will no longer be tolerated. He said in a speech at the DOJ, the center of our rule of law system, which is the pillar, the foundation of our whole government. He said he thinks CNN, other news outlets who write bad stories about him are acting illegally. Of course, they're not in our real legal system, but what happens when he's free to make up his own legal system? A lot of people on the right keep joking about him running for a third term, basically becoming president for life. Do you think they're kidding about that? And they wouldn't make it happen if they could? I don't. The only thing standing in the way are those pesky laws and the courts. So that's the danger in these immigration battles. And we'll know pretty soon how far this goes. This really could be the line, the final line they cross that breaks everything open. We can hope not. The other item for me this week, out of so many, is the protests against Tesla. First, being super clear, all the violence is completely wrong. Burning cars, shooting out windows of dealerships. Come on, it's stupid, it's completely unacceptable, it's wrong, and it's unhelpful. It just makes us look like the bad guys. Pam Bondi, our esteemed Attorney General, has claimed that attacks on Teslas are now domestic terrorism and will be dealt with harshly. We can detain and deport people illegally, even U.S. citizens, break into their homes without a warrant, ruin their lives. That's fine, no problem with that. But burn a Cybertruck, maybe even you get the death penalty. And, are they kidding? I'm not sure. So violent protests, of course, are absolutely wrong. But peaceful protests, I think, are completely justified. This guy is doing real damage to the whole world. The USAID cuts are already killing people. That's a fact. He will ultimately be directly responsible for the deaths of potentially millions of people. And in our name, how can we not protest that? And to hear him whining, I don't know why I'm being treated so poorly. I'd never hurt anyone. Tesla is a peaceful company. Seriously? You are the richest person in the world. By the way, originally an illegal alien in our country. You've become rich through billions of dollars in U.S. subsidies, but now you're destroying lives all over the world, and you think you're the one being treated unfairly? Oh, man, I'm sorry. Parenting our children, we call those natural consequences, and they provide an excellent lesson in becoming a responsible adult, which you seem not to have learned. Beyond that, those 2 points, the courts and Elon, there is just an impressive list of terrible things they've been doing this last week. Let me just reel off a few, I say. It's a long list. USDA cancels millions of dollars for food banks, claws back money already committed. Why? What's bad about food banks? Trump is trying to cancel Biden's pardons of the January 6th committee. There's no universe where that's possible, making some silly argument about being signed with auto pens. Do you think Trump personally signed all 1,400 or whatever the number was of the pardons he gave to the January 6th rioters? I doubt that. Companies are now no longer expressly prohibited from creating segregated facilities like the whites-only bathrooms from our past. That's not specifically illegal anymore. What? Fox News is showing pictures, along with the name, of judges that rule against Trump, putting their pictures up there. Is that not domestic terrorism? That actually might be. Trump announces that he has canceled security service for Hunter Biden and his wife. So no more security for them. Puts them in real physical danger. Okay, maybe you have the rights to cancel that. Fine. Why announce it? Why not do it quietly? Not only that, he also made a point to say that Hunter was in South Africa on vacation. So anyone out there looking to go after Hunter, that's where he is. He's all yours now. Is that not domestic terrorism? New cuts to the TSA, the people who screen you at the airport, no joke, include no food or vet services for their trained drug and bomb-sniffing dogs. Really? Starving the dogs? The State Department canceled a program that helped track kidnapped Ukrainian children. So we're in favor of kidnapping now and re-education? That's really horrible, that whole story. We don't hear much about that. The thousands of Ukrainian kids kidnapped from their families, brought into Russia, basically brainwashed that now they're Russians. That's horrific. They're closing down the Voice of America, the radio service that's broadcasts to millions of people around the world. Been going on, I don't remember exactly when that started. World War II, maybe anti-Soviet position, countering their propaganda. Anyway, it does so much good for us around the world. Why close that? So dumb. Cutting federal funding for libraries. Libraries. How can you be against supporting libraries? Removing gun violence from the Surgeon General's list of public health risks. One of the top killers in our country. Can't mention that anymore. Shutting down research on mRNA vaccines right when they're announcing, this came out this week, a potential cure for pancreatic cancer from a new vaccine. One of the nastiest cancers. mRNA vaccines are a miracle. Trump was constantly boasting, taking credit, trying to get more credit for the COVID vaccine developed on his watch, mRNA vaccine. And he deserved credit for that. They're a miracle. They're shutting down that research. You can't explain it. A couple more. It turns out that Trump's tariffs on Canada, on cars especially, could make it so that it ends up being cheaper to make cars in other countries and pay the tariff once than it is to make them here the way we do now and pay a tariff every time the parts go back and forth during the manufacturing process. So the very tariffs that are supposedly designed at some point to encourage more U.S. manufacturing will actually hurt manufacturing. Possible they didn't think that all the way through. Arkansas has proposed a law, you're going to love this, a new law banning gender-affirming haircuts. What does that even mean, a gender-affirming haircut? We can't wear our hair the way we want now? I'll tell you, when I was a kid and long hair was the rage, it wasn't gender-affirming, but still, that would have been unallowed, or at least only allowed if we identify as our gender at birth. This is insane. What are these people so afraid of with all this gender stuff? I don't get that either. Maybe the saddest item, in a way, Trump announced with great pride this week that he won his latest golf tournament at his club. The man is genuinely mentally ill. He didn't win that tournament. He never wins tournaments. He cheats at golf, and everyone knows it. But he's so profoundly insecure that he will cheat and lie about it and stand up and claim the prize in front of everyone. And then he announces it to the world and says, it's a great honor to win. Like he's got this false humility. And that's weird too, by the way. An honor to win, that doesn't seem like the right framing for that. Anyway, it really does boggle the mind, this guy and the people who follow him. And then the last one. For some reason, this one actually makes me more angry than the others. The White House press secretary, this woman in a job she has no business having. She's just a beautiful young woman who will say anything for Trump. So now she's the White House spokesman, the spokesman basically for the government to the entire world. So a journalist asked her for a comment on some news item. That's what they do, right? Her response was, quote, "As a matter of policy, we don't respond to reporters with pronouns in their bios," end quote. I don't know why that sets me off so much. It's so smug and ignorant and petty and disrespectful and bullying. But it's the perfect illustration of this whole administration. They're just assholes all the way down. They seem to take pleasure and pride in being the worst possible person every chance they get. When did we stop thinking it's important to be polite and respectful? What do they teach their children? I'll just never understand it. On the pushback front, first a little comic relief. Trump sandwich again, white bread, bologna, Russian sauce, small pickle, never forget. I mentioned earlier the French MP, "Give us back the Statue of Liberty." That really is so good because it's such a clear image of our backsliding. Our whole brand and mission has been to welcome and celebrate and give opportunity to people from everywhere. Of course, not so great for all of our people all the time, no doubt. But that's, the vision, the dream. And it's so much so that the French government gave us this beautiful gift symbolizing that. Can you imagine that, really? We forget how remarkable that was. And it's become the symbol of our country, and we literally no longer deserve it. It's crazy. Closer to home pushback, Margaret and I went to our first ever protest this week. Our congressman, one of the biggest assholes of them all, like for real, Derek Van Orden, he's the one who's always reminding people he was a Navy SEAL, tough guy. He wrote a book, The Navy SEAL's Guide to the Lost Art of Manhood. Oh my God, you can imagine this guy, can't you? So he was due at an event in a town near here. We drove down, stood in the cold, waved our little flags. Probably 75 people there protesting, which is a pretty good turnout in our neck of the woods. His thing is that he's been avoiding town halls. A lot of the Republicans have been around the country, apparently. Mr. Tough Guy, afraid of his constituents. Turns out he avoided this one too. I like to think I scared him off with my little flag. Later in the week, Margaret went to an actual town hall in our town. Van Orden wasn't there either, of course, but she loved it, found it very inspiring. People are starting to speak up, and it's only going to continue. You saw the huge protests in Hungary this week, hundreds of thousands of people. It won't be long before we see that here too, and that is a ray of hope in all this darkness. So that was great. In any case, those are the top stories this week. Can't believe how much there is to talk about. Can't keep going like this forever, right? Getting right up next to the breaking point, it seems to me. We'll see. Still hoping for the best. Reminded how important it is to take care of our mental health right now. The worst thing we can do is let all this knock us off our game. So check out our Why Everyone's Going Crazy video if you haven't seen that yet. Check out the Raise Your Inner Game book or training if you haven't read or taken that. If someone is seriously thinking about tattooing that material on their body, you know it's good stuff. How's that for an endorsement? So check that out if you haven't already. All right, next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about some practical stress reduction techniques, meditation, box breathing. Both of those are super helpful. This week, I want to touch again on the idea of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. And this is just a reminder, with so much coming at us all the time, to pay attention to what you're worrying about. There's plenty to worry about, and more every day, but it doesn't actually help us to worry about it unless there's something we can do about it. Now, with the Trump stuff, it's a little tricky. Most of it is removed from us, certainly nothing we can do directly about it most of the time. On the other hand, protesting, talking to people, calling representatives, those are things we can do and really all we can do and well worth doing. So I don't have an easy, clear formula for what you should and shouldn't worry about, but it's still true that worrying is bad for us. It adds an emotional weight that just makes us less effective and less happy, neither of which we want. So the suggestion is to keep a mental game journal if you don't do that already. We've talked about that before. And use it to help manage this question of what to worry about. So the general idea is you want some place to write down what's going on for you. That helps you see it and think about it more clearly. Notice what you're thinking about and worrying about. And then just curate that list as best you can. If there are things you're thinking about that are upsetting, but there's nothing you can do about them, try to avoid thinking about it. I know it can be easier said than done, but that's the idea. Again, it's harmful to your mental game to worry about things you have no control over. So just like you might cut back on alcohol or gluten or anything else you know is not good for you, cutting back on unhelpful thoughts is just a very smart thing to do. So that's Inner Game Gold this week, the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. As much as you can, keep your focus on things you have some control over as opposed to things you can't do anything about. And by the way, I should credit Stephen Covey for this classic book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I believe is where I first heard about this concept. All right, so next up would normally be raise your outer game, but to be perfectly honest, I don't have anything this week. I think it's the first time. I feel like it's been a little bit thin lately anyway, but I could not think of one thing in our health, relationship, or financial realms to talk about this week. So we'll just go directly to our challenge of the week. This week, let's work on the circle of influence. Probably don't need to do this every day, maybe 2 or 3 times this week, whatever sounds good to you. But the idea is just write down what you're thinking about and worrying about, and for each item, then ask yourself, is this in my circle of concern or my circle of influence? If it's in the influence circle, great. Think about what actions you can take to move things forward. If it's in your circle of concern, which means you can't do something about it directly, ask if it's still something you think is important enough to put some focus on. Some things may be like that. You can't actually do anything, but it's still important to you to pay attention to it. That's fine. The main thing is we don't want to get into worrying patterns unconsciously. And then for those things that are fully in your concern circle, nothing you can do, not worth worrying about, make note of that. Be clear that it's not helpful to you to worry about it, and then see if you can't resist those thoughts when they come up. And that's just a matter of noticing and saying, nope, can't do anything about that, not going to think about it, and putting your attention on something else. So that's a pretty good exercise for this week. Should definitely feel like a helpful improvement. Circle of influence versus circle of concern. And again, just to be super clear, circle of influence, we'll start with the concern. Circle of concern is everything you might be interested in or worried about or concerned about in the world. That's a large group of things. A much smaller group of things inside there is a circle of influence, which is things you can actually do something about. So it's some clarification there on how it works. All right, next up, highly recommended. Just finished 0 Day, the Netflix thriller with Robert De Niro. I would say that ended up being better than I expected. Still not great, a little obvious, a couple things didn't really make sense, but overall it was enjoyable, raised some interesting questions. I certainly wanted to know how it ended. I looked forward to catching the final episode, so a moderate recommendation there. Getting pretty close to done with the book Alien Clay. Actually, I think I might have finished that last night. Still skipping a bit. Too much inner dialogue. Though it is well done, I will say that. Ended up being a pretty fascinating concept, actually. It's one of those works that I appreciate more than I actually enjoy, you know? Bob Dylan is like that for me. A couple of music things. I finally listened to the latest Cloud Cult record from last fall. It's called Alchemy Creek. I must say, I was pretty blown away. That guy, Craig Minowa, the writer and singer in that band, he's just next level good as an artist. He really is. His writing is unique, his structures, his lyrics, the dynamics, he's especially good at that. And, you know, I feel like I know a little bit about songwriting, and he just feels next level to me. Like, I can't quite imagine how I would get from here to there. I mean, it's a different style. It wouldn't make sense for me to go there, but it's just super impressive in many ways. Excuse me. I had never heard of Cloud Cult, but they played a show here many years ago, and I was amazed with that show. You know, rock music, at its best, has the ability to be transcendent, or at least for me. U2 could do that. Peter Gabriel, Led Zeppelin, Yes, the band back in the day. I don't mean it has to be heavy, although a lot of those acts are just grand and uplifting and sort of transformational. I can hardly think of anyone who does that better than him. That's saying quite a bit. Interesting, they actually moved here, or at least he did with his family that lives here in town. Also, his bass player lives here now and teaches at our kids' school. That's cool. But anyway, and by the way, that's probably why they played the show here. But anyway, if you really want to hear something amazing, check out the song I Am a Force Field from their latest record. There's a link in the show notes. Another music item, different but also amazing. I am pretty obsessed with a new song from Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga. I wouldn't normally expect to be excited or honestly even aware of something like that because I am not that tuned into the pop world, to say the least. I do consistently like Bruno Mars does, though. I mean, there's something about his style I really like. But this song is called Die With a Smile. Really got its hooks into me. And the video is just so great. It's really campy, 60s vibe, over the top. But they play it so straight. And the song is so good, it's like I can't tell if it's cringy or cool. It's right on that line, so it ends up being cool. And the song is just a good piece. Really good, well written, beautiful, performance is great, sentiment is great. I'm just super impressed and into it, listening to it. Like, I never listen to stuff over and over, really. Been listening to that song a lot. So highly recommended for that one too. Die With a Smile from Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars. For an app, this is interesting. This is about the pushing back on the political front. There's an app called 5 Calls. It basically makes it easy for you to call your senator or representative about the issues of the day. There's a list of current items being considered in Congress, like the current budget bill, for example. Everything they're working on, you scroll through, click on the issue that's important to you. It tells you more about it. If you want to make a call, it gives you a script you can use if you want, and a link to call your senator or representative. Margaret turned me on to this app. She's never done anything like that, but she's pretty motivated to do something. So she made her first call the other day and felt pretty good about it, and the app made the difference. So easy to recommend that as well. Final recommendation, getting progressively smaller in scope. I've started to use a new, it's sort of a toothpick. Not really a toothpick like, for after dinner, more of a floss alternate. I was at the dentist recently for my checkup, my teeth cleaning. My hygienist recommended this. She gave me something, it was a different version. It looked like a tiny bottle scrubber, little plastic bristles around a wire core. But you push that into the spaces between your teeth, run it around in there. Actually feels pretty good, like you're doing something extra good for your teeth and gums. I ended up buying something a little different. It's sort of a rubbery version with little bristles on there. But I must say, I really like them. I feel like they make my gums happy. Anyway, I'll link to those in the notes if you're interested. Gum brand Soft Picks Original is what they're called. Pretty cool. All right, that's it for this week's show. Reminder, if you do enjoy the show, please do give it a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It's a big help in new people finding the show. Appreciate that very much. If you want to tattoo any of the Raise Your Inner Game material on your body somewhere, you're welcome to do that. Just please send me a picture. If that's too much, I understand. You can still get the book or the Sports Academy training if you're an athlete or the parent of an athlete. There's no better time than now to raise your inner game. So please visit raiseyourinnergame.com for more on that. All right, have a great week. Let me know any questions. Otherwise, keep up the good work. I'll see you next week.